Welcome to our lesson. Here's a question for you. Is team building and great teams an art or science? Most people think that it's an art because it deals with people's emotions and personalities and charisma, dynamics within the office. However, in this lesson, I'm going to show you that it's actually a science, and it's a science that you can use in your own organization. So we're going to be taking a look at some research studies done at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA. And let's see what they've discovered about the science of team building. So here's how you actually build a great team. We'll be starting with research that was done at MIT, and it was published in Harvard Business Review. It was actually the lead article on HBR. So Sandy Penland is someone who I actually met a few years ago. He's actually one of the most quoted data scientists in the world. And what he did is that he's trying to turn team building into a science. And as you'll see today, he's actually done it. So we're going to start with a case study on call centers. So here's the issue with call centers where people call in for customer service when they need some help. The interesting thing about studying them is that they're very easy to study. The tasks are very clear cut, very easy to monitor. The performance is really easy to measure. How many issues did each person on the phone resolve? What are their customer satisfaction ratings? And what is the AHT, or average handling time? The goal is to get more calls in with fewer time on the phone so they can be more productive, which is why it's easy to measure. Now, the question that we're going to start with is, why don't all call centers perform the same? Well, it's not an art, it's actually a science. This is a picture of Professor Sandy Penland. He works at the MIT Human Dynamics Laboratory, which is part of the MIT Media Lab. Now, he was able to identify the dynamics of high-performance teams. And here's what he found. They have a lot of energy, a lot of creativity, there's a shared commitment within them, and they have a lot of engagement within each other. Now, the interesting thing is that you can actually observe this behavior, you can quantify it, meaning turning it into a number, you can measure it, and the good thing is it can be taught, which is what we're doing today. I'm teaching it to you so that you can teach it to your teams. Now, what he noticed is that the most important thing in team building is the pattern of communication. It's the pattern that's really important. So it's how we communicate is actually more important than what we communicate when we're working with teams. The reason is language to all of us, whether it's Chinese, English, Spanish, German, doesn't matter, language is actually new to the human species. What it allows us to do is that we can communicate dominance, we can communicate our interest or lack thereof, or we can communicate emotions. It shapes how we make our decisions. It also shapes how we coordinate work amongst ourselves. So here's how early problem solving worked. So imagine a lot of people sitting around a campfire before electricity was invented. So we're all sitting together in a circle at the campfire. That's our team. People are making suggestions back and forth. And then we relate the observations to each other. So we compare notes, we compare thoughts. And then as a group, we indicate our interest or approval in any of the ideas, and eventually we pick one. Now, some people in the group don't contribute, and this is what we still get today. Now, the less people that contribute, that means there's less information in the group, and you get weaker judgment and poorer outcomes. So people that don't contribute actually cause harm to the team. So now what we're searching for is the it factor, that special thing that makes that team just amazing. So that's what we're looking for. It's called the it factor. So you can kind of sense a buzz in a team, or you can sense high energy in a team. You don't even need to know what they're saying. And these studies did not actually study what they were saying, but how they said it. So again, you don't need to know the content of team discussions, but you do need to know the manner in which it is communicated to people. And little research has been done on team communication until now. Now, these investigations did cross multiple industries, and they looked at varying performance. So innovation teams, how were they doing? Post-op wards in hospitals, all kinds of different teams were taken a look at. Now, here was the biggest predictor of team success. Again, it's the way they communicated with each other. Now, the way they communicated, the manner in which they did it, was a greater predictor of team success than individual intelligence, their personality, their skills, or the substance of the discussions. So the best predictor of team productivity is two variables. Variable one is the team energy. Do they have a lot of energy? Number two is engagement outside of formal meetings. Do the team members meet outside of the team meetings? If so, the more they do it, the better off you are. Now, factors 1 and 2 actually accounted for 1/3 of dollar productivity variance between identical teams. Now, here's a policy change in best practice that actually came out of MIT, and it was the group coffee break. Most coffee breaks are done individually, so you have a few minutes to spend by yourself. However, they found that if people took coffee breaks together, they had more inter-team socialization outside of work. They got to know each other better, got to understand each other, their values, got to like each other, and they became more helpful. Now, the results of just a group coffee break was that the average handling time on a low-performing call center team dropped by 20%, which means productivity increased by 20% because they could handle each call with 20% less time. The average handling time for the entire call center decreased by 8%, which was an increase in 8% for the entire call center. At the same time, employee satisfaction increased by 10% because they got to know and like their coworkers. Now, what Sandy Penland started to do was he created these sociometric badges. They're like ID badges that you wear on your body. And they would capture 100 data points per minute. They tested these out at 21 different organizations, which was 2,500 people. And they had those badges on for about 6 weeks. Now, this is what they measured: people's tone of voice, whether they faced each other or not, any gestures that they may have made, eye contact or no eye contact, whether people interrupted, whether they were extroverted, and whether they expressed empathy. So they did detect patterns, and these patterns existed regardless of the industry. The productive teams actually did have what were called similar data signatures. The data was so consistent that you could actually predict success just by looking at the data. Now, here's one thing that they actually did is they did data collection at a cocktail party for a group of students who were trying to win a business plan contest. Based on the data of the different teams and how they interacted with each other at the cocktail party, they predicted who was going to win the business plan contest. Now, here are 5 common characteristics of successful teams. Number 1 is that everyone on the team talks and listens in roughly equal measure. They're also brief. So everyone talks the same amount, and each person takes a short amount of time to get their point across. Number 2 is that members will face one another, and their conversations and their gestures are very energetic. So they talk with their hands. Number 3 is that members will connect directly with one another, not just with the team leader. So they'll talk side to side, not just to the person leading the meeting. Number 4 is that the members will carry on what are called back channel or side conversations within the team. So within a team, you'll have side conversations going on. You actually want to encourage that. And number 5, members will periodically break. They'll go exploring outside the team for extra information and then bring that information back to the team. So here are some surprising observations that were made at MIT. Individual talent and reasoning contributed far less to team success than one might expect. So instead of selecting individuals for how smart they are or what their accomplishments are, learn how they communicate and then shape and guide the team so that it follows successful communication patterns. So there are 3 key elements of communication. The first element is energy. So this can be measured. They measure the number and nature of exchanges among team members. So one exchange is I would make a comment to you, and then you acknowledge it with a nod or a yes. You acknowledge that I've actually spoken to you. That is one exchange of energy. So they just simply measure the number of times that happens in a team. You can have that happen simultaneously in a team because two groups could be doing it at the same time. They also found that face-to-face meetings were the most valuable. Second most valuable is video conferencing or using the phone. Also, the more participants that were on a call or a conference call, the less effective the technology was. The least valuable form of communication, email and texting. So the energy score was just simply the number of exchanges, and they weighted those exchanges by value. So they were given heavier weight if they were face-to-face exchanges and less weight if those are email exchanges. And then you got a team energy score, and then they took an average of the individual scores. Now these scores will change over time based on how people are interacting over the 6 weeks. The second key element of communication is engagement. So this is how the energy within the whole team is distributed amongst the team members. So for example, if you had a 3-person team, they would look at engagement, meaning the average energy between team member A and B, team member A and C, and then team members B and C. Now, if all 3 have high energy and interact equally, then engagement is high. You can get clusters of high engagement and non-participators. So you could have a handful of people over here talking a lot, and then no one's talking over here. That would give you actually lower performance. Now, with an investment team that was experimented with, they found that partially engaged teams, meaning only a few people were not participating, they were actually less profitable in their investment decisions. And they also found that telephone teams, just telephone teams, did actually worse, which makes sense. The third key element of communication is exploration. So this is where communication is happening between members of the team with people outside that team. So they're gathering outside information. Now the energy between a team and the other teams it interacts with is also measured. So you could talk to other teams, or you could talk to outside resources. High performers in a team looked for more outside connections. And then high exploration scores were critical for innovation teams. So if you need creativity on your team, make sure that people are going outside their team to get outside information. And the measurement of this was that the badges were more widely dispersed in the organization. So let's say you're in a large organization, you may need to have badges in the finance department, marketing department, HR, if people are going to come asking questions there to try to get more information. Now, one noticeable challenge of this dynamic is exploration and engagement do not exist easily together because the energy is going in 2 different directions. So the more energy you spend engaging with your team, that's energy spent, but then that's also less time to go outside the team to explore. So you can have a disconnect that if you only have so much energy. So if you're spending it in the team, that's great, but then you're gonna have less for exploring. If you spend more for exploring, you're not with your team engaging with them because you're out exploring, and that's okay. They have found that with successful creative teams that they'll oscillate between exploring outside the community for discovery, and then they engage with the team when they come back and share those ideas. Now, this accounts for half the difference in creative output between teams. So making sure they go outside the team to get information is a good idea. And you can actually predict high and low creativity teams with 90% accuracy just by seeing how much they explore outside the team. Some new observations that were made at MIT were that about 35% of team performance variation was due to the number of face-to-face exchanges. So the more face-to-face, the better. The optimum number of exchanges was about 24 to 30 exchanges per hour. Beyond that, performance drops. So you don't want to have too many exchanges, but around 24 to 30 is great. In high-performance teams, the members are listening or speaking to the whole group about 50% of the time. So about half the time, they're talking to the group, not to individuals. Members do address the group very briefly with to-the-point statements, so they don't go on and on, just hogging the air. The other 50% of the time is one-to-one short conversation. So you can actually measure this within your team or set these rules up and have an observer in your team to make sure that people are hitting the metrics that you're looking for. They also found that social time was critical, and that accounted for about 50% of positive changes in communication. Here's what hasn't worked. Beer meetings, cocktail parties, similar events didn't have that much impact. What did have impact was longer lunchroom tables. That actually had a large impact because strangers were able to sit next to each other and get to know each other. Constant seeking of fresh perspectives from all the groups and inside and outside the organization was very important. So make sure you encourage people to go outside those meetings. You know, there's 3 ways that you can actually apply the badge data. So step 1 are what we call visualization maps, which you're going to be able to build on your own. This visually shows where the team energy is flowing. Now you can identify non-participants or members who are being ignored. So you can tell that they're not participating, but are they being ignored or are they just not talking and they're shy? Now, if they're not participating, are they trying to contribute, but someone's cutting them off? Are they intimidated by the leader? Do they interrupt other people and they don't listen, and so other people don't listen to them to shun them and punish them? Are they only talking to one team member? Do they hide from the group physically, like they actually miss the meeting or show up late or sit in the back? Is the leader too dominant and intimidating? So is the leader causing this? A case study was done in a bank in Prague where they had uneven performance between the different branches. So they did 6 weeks of sensor badges, and the next slide I'm going to show you what a 9-person team did and how it developed over several days. Now note that these teams were a mix of Soviet era teams and modern teams. So on the left you'll see this is ideal team energy, the large brown gray circle, okay? Now this smaller white circle is the actual team energy for this team. So the team energy is much smaller than what it should be optimally. So this is comparing the team energy to optimal team energy. The small white ball should actually be the same size as the large gray one, and it's not. Next is taking a look at the amount of informal energy. This is the amount of energy that a team member is contributing. So this is team member A. She has an A on his head or her head. And this person's putting in a lot of energy. Team member B, not so much. Team member C, a lot of energy. D, not too much. E, pretty good. F, not much. G, not much. H, even less. I, not much. So a lot of this team is not participating. Very little individual energy. And then these long lines into the team energy is the amount of energy contributed to the team. So C is giving a lot of energy. B is giving a medium amount. A is giving some. And these are doing nothing. Over here is graphing how individuals talk to each other. So A, B, and C talk a lot. H only talks to C. G talks to C. E talks a little bit to B and C. F talks to B. And G talks to A. So let's take a look at these observations. These are just on energy. So again, this is the Soviet era team. This is a team where we can actually see visually that it has poor customer service because A, C, and E have more informal energy. So A with the large ball, C and E are giving more energy. A, B, and C are contributing a lot to the team. E has a lot of energy but isn't contributing anything. These people aren't doing anything at all. They're not contributing. Now there looks like a hierarchy here that C seems to be the leader commanding A and B to do what they want. And you can see it over here as well, that they do a lot of talking to each other. And then B seems to be commanding F and G, A to G. So now these other people, like I and D, are completely isolated. They feel that they have no input. You know, the leaders are usually surprised that they're being dominant. This could be a dominant person leading the team C, and everyone else is afraid of them. But this visually shows you the dysfunction. So now C is going to have to start asking I, hey, what do you think? Can you contribute? D, what are your opinions? So it's going to be C's job to do that. Now on engagement, this is how the members communicate with each other. So this is the engagement one on the right. So again, A, B, and C, very heavy engagement. G is trying to talk with A and C with this line here. H is trying to talk to C. We have this channel here. F is trying to talk to B, but D and I, they're invisible. So we need to either replace them, engage them, check in on them. What's going on? Why aren't you talking? Now here is another way to take a look at the map, and this is the exploration map. So this is how teams communicate with one another. Now this is management, and these are all their teams. And you see that they actually talk a lot to team 4. They explore a lot, but the management internal energy you see is right here. It's this white ball. It's very, very small. The large energy is actually in team 3, and there's good energy in team 5. So the energy and engagement's not high in the management team because they're exploring. Remember that part that when you explore, you don't have energy back for your team. Now they're spending their energy talking to team 4, team 9, and team 10. Oddly enough, only teams 2 and 3 talk to each other. There's no links between the others. Team 8, totally isolated. Team 6, totally isolated. They're not doing anything. You know, management teams 4 and 9, They're highly engaged. So these could be very close buddies to management. So you might need to bust up the silos and also go back to management and say, you're not engaging all your teams. You're not engaging team 6 or team 8. Get rid of them or engage them. Now this is a communication map between different departments. And the thickness of the arcs is an indication of how much communication there is. Top line is face-to-face. Bottom line is communication by email. So you see this team is doing a lot of emailing and not as much face-to-face. So now we're going to look at a case study of a German bank doing a new product launch. They were not having enough face time. They were doing too much email. Not all the departments were talking. And this actually predicts a potential failure to launch. So again, we know that emails don't do as well as face-to-face. So whatever they're doing, they're not doing it well. And if we had to predict if it's going to happen well, we would predict it's not because they're not doing enough face-to-face. Now on day 2, because we show them these graphs every day, on day 2, you can see that management's doing a lot of communicating. They're talking to development, sales, support, customer service, not as much, but a lot to development. Not much face-to-face, a lot of email, not ideal, but also notice that customer service is the least connected to the other teams. That's kind of bad if you're doing a product launch. Now on day 6, you'll start to see that management is starting to communicate more face-to-face. Sales and support is doing more face-to-face, but still customer service, not doing much talking to the support team or the sales team. So only sales and support are interacting with each other a lot because they're preparing for a launch. On day 15, this is kind of scary. They're getting really close. Sales and development is clearly engaging, so they're talking to each other a lot. Customer service, still not involved really with anybody that much. Day 23, this is 2 days after the launch. The teams are finally communicating in person. Take a look what's happened. Customer service is talking a lot to support. This big, look how thick that line is. Now the day before, it was nothing. And now it's huge. Why? Because customer service has problems. The launch didn't go well. People are complaining on the phone. They don't know what the answers are. So now they're calling up support saying, what do we say to our customers? So they're trying to solve this problem. So this is basically trying to clean up a mess. Now the big jump in the communication is because sales now is yelling at development why the product didn't work right, and they're blaming each other. And then sales is yelling at customer service is yelling at support. So this is the first time where the email communication is actually less than the in-person. See how thick the in-person is right now? So here's 3 steps to applying badge data. Step 1 is look at your visualization maps. Show where that team energy is. So we already just went through that one. Step 2 is training. You can use this visual data to help multinational companies. So this is really helpful if you have teams from different countries looking at different languages. Everyone can look at a picture and they understand it. So here's a case study between a Japanese and an American team. Some of the challenges they had on day 1 was there's physical distance, so Zoom calls, mixed language, digital only, different cultures. Japan and America are quite different. And you see there's really low energy and engagement. And you guessed it, this was the Japanese part of the team. These were the Americans. The ones talking the most were the Americans, because that's what they do culturally. And the Japanese don't talk as much. This is on day 1. So lower left, not getting much participation from the Japanese branch, but it's important to have them. That's what you need. But you see that there's a lot of communication in the upper right between these two. So now we have to fix it. Here's day 7. Huge improvement. It's almost a perfect circle. You have a lot of engagement from the person from Japan now. The other person from Japan's talking more, but there's a lot more connections going on. And see these cross connections, each team member's talking to each other. So now the team is performing. So step 3 on applying the data is you want to map the energy and engagement against performance metrics. So you can map improved communication patterns against self-reported daily productivity. Ask them, how do you think it's going? And then show them the maps. The closer the patterns match the high performance ideal, the higher the productivity. So the more the team agreed, the more productivity they had. Self-reporting on those maps improved communication. So ask people to create their own maps. Some more surprising results from MIT. Low energy, low engagement teams could actually outperform unbalanced teams because the unbalanced teams were fighting. The unbalanced teams could have high energy and low engagement, or low energy and high engagement. So this could have some discord where that smaller low engagement team might actually be doing better. So the manager needs to balance the energy and engagement. You can create your own metrics. So the team rated creativity, you can rate frustration, you can rate likability. You can also graph energy and engagement to class performance metrics. Here's a way to map communication and performance. So the blue area is high efficiency, red is low efficiency. So when you have high engagement and low energy, that's bad. High energy, low engagement, that's bad. So we actually want is like a nice even mix. Now, what you'll notice here, this was the coffee break. Before the coffee break, this team was here. When they went to the group coffee break, they got closer to the blue. So they increased their engagement. Engagement went up, energy went up. So the group coffee break actually does well. So how can you actually use this information, even if you don't have a badge? You could reorganize office space and seating so that people interact more. You can set an example by having more face-to-face meetings. Include quiet team members. Ask them, please share with us what you're thinking. Bring in new team members, shake it up. You can coach members to interrupt less if that's a problem, and encourage your team to look into people's eyes when talking, especially if that's cross-culture. And again, the group coffee breaks. Now, optimal team members can be what are called natural leaders or charismatic connectors. And this is what they look like. They circulate actively within the team. They engage in short, high-energy conversations. They're democratic with their time. They communicate equally with everyone. They make sure that everyone gets a chance to talk. They don't just take all the air. They listen equal to or more than they talk, so they listen more than they talk. They're very engaged when they're listening, so they're actively engaged. They try to connect the teammates. They spread ideas around, and they do seek ideas from outside the group. So for future improvements in the field, the badges are in their 7th version. They're now coming up with apps in real time to get real-time feedback, so you could look at how the meeting went right away. They're expanding data collection to look at negotiation techniques, leadership building, so you can measure anything really. And this could be a gateway to improve digital global teams, so lots of opportunity. And in closing, here's your 20-minute homework. You're gonna map a team that you have worked with before. Could be a current team or a former team, that's okay. So take a look at the map here, choose one of them, and you wanna identify your members with letters. So we're gonna keep it anonymous. Each member is gonna get a circle size representing the amount of their informal energy. How much energy do they have? Then you're also gonna make the link of thickness of how much they contribute to the team. And then you're gonna make a team circle on how optimal you think the team was. So you're doing 3 things. How big is each person's individual energy? How much energy are they giving to the team? And how optimal was the team performance versus the perfect team? That's it. So I welcome you to email me if you have any questions on how to do the homework. This should take you about 20 minutes. Again, it can be a current team that you have or a former team. Do the map and you'll start to see how easy it is to map this out and how informative it is. And I will see you at the next lesson.